Okay, once again, I hold no responsibility if you spoil Final Fantasy VI by watching this video. You have been warned. On a frozen, wind-swept cliff top, 3 figures riding giant armour gaze down on a distant mining village. There's the town. Hard to believe an Esper's been found intact there 1,000 years after the War of the Magi. Think it's still alive? Probably, judging by the urgency of our orders. And this woman, this sorcerer, why is she here? I heard she fried 50 of our Magitech armoured soldiers in under 3 minutes. Not to worry, the slave crown on her head robs her of all conscious thought. She'll follow orders. We'll approach from the east. Move out. Now this is how you do the opening to an RPG. When I first saw this sequence, my jaw hit the floor. Immediately I was sucked into the story and wanted to see what happened next. The 3 characters, through your commands, enter the village and destroy everything in their way to reach the frozen Esper, an ancient magical creature. But when they arrive, the mysterious girl has a strange reaction and wakes up hours later with only one thing left in her memory. Her name, Terra. Little does she know, but she's the catalyst for the evil empire's domination of the world. A resistance group sends a thief, Locke, to find Terra and bring her back to their base. With the help of King Edgar of Figaro and his long-lost brother Sabin, Locke brings Terra before the Resistance's leader. Even though she still has holes in her memory, she decides to join the fight against the Empire and its power-mad Emperor, Gestal. This is easily one of the most ambitious plots that Square has ever attempted, and it's brilliant. The intelligent storytelling in Final Fantasy VI puts most Hollywood movies to shame. Speaking of which, it would make a brilliant movie. There's so many smaller stories entwined into the larger narrative, some of them well hidden. In the case of the ninja mercenary Shadow, the player can see flashbacks of his former life in his dreams, but only if they stay at certain inns with him in the party. There's so many optional and hidden things like that in this game. For example, when Locke rescues Celis, there's numerous different ways to tackle the situation, and all of them have a slightly different outcome. By stealing people's clothes, Locke can disguise himself. You can rescue Celis either as regular Locke, or disguised as a merchant, or, for a cute little Star Wars reference, have him disguised as a soldier. It doesn't change anything in the game, but it's fun to find all these hidden little Easter eggs. Repeated playthroughs would reveal things you didn't see the first time. When you consider where the series has come since 1994, where you basically now run in a predetermined straight line to the finish, the older games seem so much more advanced. Ironic, no? There's a grand total of 14 party members. Some of them are tragically underwritten, and as characters in the plot are practically non-existent, but others are amongst the most believable and interesting people that have ever been part of a Final Fantasy story. Do you know it's actually possible to finish this game with only 3 characters if you're looking for a new challenge? Even though jobs aren't specified like they were in Final Fantasy V, each character is given a predetermined job that defines their battle skills. Strago is a blue mage, Mog is a geomancer, Locke's a thief, and Umaro's a berserker, I suppose. The token Cid appears in the story about halfway through the game. He's a kindly old scientist who raised Celis. Even though he works for the Empire, he has a good heart and he helps the team out. It's a much smaller role than the previous couple of Cids, but he's a pretty important character in the overall story. And then there's Kefka. Kefka is one of the Emperor's chief advisors and leader of the Resurrect Magic program. In his experiments, he was exposed to an unhealthy amount of magic, which sent him completely loopy, and he now dresses like a clown and secretly harbours ambitions of world destruction. That's right, not domination, destruction. This guy is insane. King Edgar doesn't give him what he wants, so he torches his castle. The people of Doma resist the Empire, so he poisons their water and kills the lot of them, laughing all the while. Not surprisingly, he kills just about everyone who stands in his way, including the Emperor himself. In video games, there are so many villains that threaten to take over or destroy the world, but the heroes come and stop them just in the nick of time. Let's not forget that in Final Fantasy VI, Kefka actually succeeds. He actually manages to send the entire planet into a state of ruin and turns himself into a psychotic god. Sure, the heroes manage to regroup and cast him down a year or two later, but Wow, Kefka's a villain that actually managed to taste some sweet success for a while. What a psycho. The active time battle system returns mostly unchanged from Final 5, but it was tweaked a lot, which results in more thoughtful and tactical battles. There seems to be a lot more to think about when you're fighting in this game. As with all old school Final Fantasy games, the random encounters can get pretty darn annoying when you're trying to figure out a dungeon area, but I suppose you've just got to accept that they're part and parcel of the RPG deal. Can't level up without experience. I just love the way that the gameplay is there to serve the story. One of my favourite moments is when the main party goes in 3 different directions and you, the player, have to choose which part of the story you want to play next. I love this. I can't believe Square never really did anything like this again, except perhaps the town scenes in Final Fantasy IX where the characters were split up and you got to see what they were up to. I also love the ebb and flow to Final Fantasy VI's plot. Sometimes it's tense and dangerous, sometimes the characters are just wandering around taking it easy. Back then, Square understood that to tell a good story, it can't be go 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 all the time. Go go? You're encouraged to wander around and smell the roses, so to speak. Having said that though, there's a tangible sense of menace and darkness that was new to the series with this game. The characters seem a lot more real, the world seems more real, and the danger seems more real. The graphics looked amazing in 1994. The backgrounds had a beautiful hand-painted look to them that was a big step up from the previous entries. Compare this forest in Final Fantasy V with a forest in Final Fantasy VI. You can see the huge leap not just in the graphics but in the artistic vision. The little people are they're pretty tiny, much smaller than Secret of Mana's for example, but Square managed to put a lot of character and emotion into these little guys. There's only one spot in the game where the graphics are absolutely awful, and that's the minecart escape sequence. When I first saw this, I thought the game was glitching. It's hard to believe that Square thought these graphics matched the quality of the rest of the game. Thankfully it only lasts a minute or two, but other than that, Final Fantasy VI is one of the best looking 16-bit games ever. You also couldn't play it without admiring the music. Without a doubt, one of Uematsu's greatest works. Never before had Final Fantasy sounded so cinematic, so dramatic, and so epic. The original English translation by Ted Woolsey is a bit hit and miss. The dialogue's pretty hokey in spots, like when you find Shadow unconscious here. Her? Pretty sure Shadow's a dude. The Game Boy re-release got a completely new translation and it's much better. It also got extra endgame stuff, which is good, because one of the original release's main faults was the lack of stuff to do for those crazy levelers after they'd finished the game. Sure, you can get all the super weapons and grind to ridiculous levels, but for what? Yeah, I play Final Fantasy VI mainly because I love the story. It's full of so many memorable moments. Who could forget Sabin, Cyan and Shadow escaping the ghosts on the Phantom train? Or searching through the thieves' town of Zozo to find Terra at the top of the tall tower? Or rescuing Realm from the burning building? Or poor Celis, realising that the world is destroyed, she's completely alone on a deserted island and there's nothing left to live for. That scene's pretty heavy, even by today's standards. Or how about discovering Locke's backstory, how he lost the love of his life and he's been trying to make up for it ever since? And of course the famous opera scene where Celis stands in for the missing leading lady, performing the opera for the audience and hopefully a keen airship owner. She just needs to make sure she sings the right lyrics. With a game that's so loved by so many, there's been heaps of stuff done with it over the years. More recently I've been following Orinoco's webcomic. It's really good, and his art style has been constantly improving over the last couple of years. At the moment he's just finished the raft scene, so there's still a long way to go, but I highly recommend checking it out. Final Fantasy VI was the real turning point for the series. It went from being a good but fairly cliched RPG into an absolute must-play. This is undoubtedly the greatest RPG on the Super Nintendo, and one of the greatest RPGs of all time. It seems criminal that it never got a PAL release on the Super Nintendo, but thankfully re-releases have found their ways to our shores. Now all we need is a fully blown HD remake. Please, Square Enix? Please? Next week I'm taking a trip into a comic artist's book, and then having a nice relaxing holiday on Adventure Island. Peace out.